Yeah, I like Victor's idea. He's turned a dragon into Lassie. Whenever you get into trouble, you just whistle. Hey, boy!
Welcome back to On the Throne, the Shat on TV podcast, unofficial companion piece to the incomparable HBO series, Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons. Alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our fan email episode where we look back at the week's episode of Game of Thrones and provide our feedback on the top listener emails for the week, all part of a segment we call The Small Council. This week's episode was entitled Eastwatch. You listened to our ideas on Tuesday's Deep Dive, and now it's our turn to hear from you.
Yeah, I like these emails. We got some strange listeners, and it's exciting. It's nice to see people putting in the work, and I'm excited to get some feedback on these and see what you think of them as well.
Yeah, after the ass-kicking we got on Twitter today, it was nice to return to the safe confines of our castle and go deep into the chambers to go through these rather thoughtful emails. Just so you know, Big D lobbied hard for a lot of these, so it's going to be an expanded episode of the Small Council.
I think we have some great emails, a lot of unique takes. Not everything is positive. Some people have issues, and some of our writers brought that up.
All right, without further ado, Big D, let's tear right into the Small Council.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
All right, our first Small Council missive comes from Stas from Kiev. It says, hey guys, I just want to point out a quick point that came into my mind after your deep dive. You mentioned that Jon is Targaryen and Targaryens don't get along with Baratheons. However, if you look at where the history of Westeros begins, you'll see stories of Aegon and his trusted friend, Orys Baratheon. Orys Baratheon was the founder of House Baratheon, as well as the commander of Aegon the Conqueror's army. The first ever hand of the king to Aegon, his bastard half-brother, and his closest friend and ally. This brings a whole new dynamic to Jon and Gendry's friendship, because while Ned and Robert led a revolution, Aegon and Orys established the world of Westeros as we know it. Maybe it's possible that while Jon and Gendry's alliance may somewhat mirror Robert and Ned, it's actually a callback to the founders of Westeros. The alliance of Targaryen and Baratheon may not be that bad, after all.
Yeah, so they may have had a good relationship in the past, but Dany's resentment and lack of trust for the Baratheons/Lannisters, originated with Jaime stabbing her father in the back. So whatever was, good in the past, I don't think she's going to remember anything more than just the Kingslayer.
I do think, however, Stas, that this kind of points back again to we talk about these cycles that the show seems to be really obsessed with in season 7, where there are waves of repetition. Again, this idea of generation after generation and being caught in loops. And a lot of the emails that we received this week reflect that. So thanks for writing in, Stas. Our next email comes from Cassie Ray. And Cassie Ray writes, hey guys, I'm hoping you can settle a debate that I had tonight with my fiance. Everyone, including myself, says that Jon has more claim because he's Rhaegar's last living son. However, the line of succession gets a little fuzzy because Rhaegar was never actually crowned king. So let's say Aerys and Rhaegar both died during the war, but the Targaryens never lost the throne to the Lannisters' Baratheons. The crown wouldn't have gone down to Rhaegar's firstborn son, it would have went to Aerys' secondborn son, right? Now, taking into consideration that sex doesn't seem to be an issue anymore in regards to who rules, Aerys' last living child is Daenerys, so wouldn't she have more claim than Jon? I hope you guys can help me out, and I look forward to hearing your answer. Your podcast is awesome, and I love listening to you guys. Cassie Ray. All right, Cassie, so I did some research, and what I found was that depending on the house, succession actually can change in different ways. So among the First Men, there's a certain order of succession, and among the Targaryens, there's also a law of succession. And according, again, to 2 or 3 sources I found, always find more than one source, the throne can be inherited only by a male descendant. And if there is no other male of the house, then the throne passes to female. So in this case, if you look at Aerys, if Aerys was to die, or does die, it would go to Rhaegar. If Rhaegar is not around, then it goes to Aegon, Jon, if legitimized, and then Viserys would be the order of succession. If all the men are gone, there are no other men of the house or males of the house, then the throne would pass to the female. And that's why Daenerys has a claim right now, because she's the last of the Targaryens as far as the world of Westeros knows.
Yeah, but all the houses weren't equal in their bias by gender. I believe some of the houses are different.
So yeah, it can change among different houses. So among the first men in Andal law, first comes the male descendants of the deceased laws, and then the female offspring, and then their relatives. So in that case, let's reset, right? Everybody's alive again. Okay, go back to the beginning. Let's say Rob had a child, okay, while Ned was still alive, okay, a legitimate child, married, had a child, okay. If Ned dies, then it goes to Rob. If Rob dies, then it goes to Bran. If Bran dies, then it goes to Rickon, then Sansa, Arya, and then other relatives. Obviously, you'd be excluding Jon Snow because he's considered a bastard son of Ned Stark.
So, ladies, if you're planning on ruling, House Targaryen would not be the place to be born.
Absolutely not. All right, next up, we've got one coming from Victor. And Victor writes, the latest episode, episode 5, obviously further confirmed the theory that Jon Snow is indeed a Targaryen by displaying to the viewers, and for a considerably long time, Drogon's fondness and affection for Jon, establishing at least a little connection between them. The show obviously wanted to make very clear that dragons like Jon. Later in the episode, we see that Jon Snow goes yet again beyond the wall with a small group of men to catch a white. Now, I strongly believe this connection between Jon and Drogon will play a crucial role in the episodes to come, because if you go back to the season 7 trailers, there's a particular shot in which Jon Snow, together with what we now know as a small group, are all beyond the wall, but they get in trouble with the Army of the Dead, clearly. You can see Jon and his group kind of on top of a rock or something with thousands, if not tens of thousands of the Army of the Dead surrounding them. They are clearly going to die in that situation because it's thousands of whites versus like 10 men, unless a miracle happens, unless some big thing intervenes in their favor. And this is where Drogon comes into play. Since Jon is a Targaryen and now has a connection with Drogon, Drogon will actually start to follow Jon around and protect him too, just like Drogon has a connection with Daenerys and follows her around and protects her. What will happen in the next episode is that Daenerys will be at Dragonstone, just going about doing her thing, when she and everyone will notice Drogon seemingly disappearing just out of the blue, going somewhere that they don't know and without Daenerys. Then Jon Snow and his group will be hopeless on top of that rock, having accepted death and just waiting to die, while surrounded by the Army of the Dead, when Drogon will Deus Ex Machina show up out of nowhere beyond the wall, burn up thousands of whites, and take Jon Snow to safety. A replay of what Drogon did when Daenerys was trapped by the Sons of the Harpy in the Colosseum. This will, of course, make Jon question who he really is, who was his mother, and when Bran tells Jon Snow the truth about his parentage, he will accept it without skepticism.
Yeah, I like Victor's idea. He's turned a dragon into Lassie. Whenever you get into trouble, you just whistle, "Hey, boy!" and he comes down. I can't see it happening. Yeah, we all predict from the trailer that Jon and the group up north is going to run into trouble, but I can't see Drogon just abandoning Daenerys and flying off on his own. No matter how much they liked him and how much he rubbed his belly and touched him on the nose and they bonded, I don't see that happening.
I think the estimated speed for these dragons, I've read different ideas, but I think it's somewhere around 65 to 70 miles per hour. Remember that they're not airplanes. It seems that Drogon, first of all, would have a primacy response to Dany, who hopefully is not just doing her thing, walking around Dragonstone, but actually has some important shit going on. I'm actually surprised, honestly, that Drogon hasn't been used, nor have any of the other dragons, to go and assist Casterly Rock. It's like poor Grey Worm's just hanging out there with his ass in the wind, and they've got the air cavalry and aren't using them.
Yeah, and people have commented, wondering why she's only chosen to use one dragon so far. It seems like a waste of assets, or maybe she's not just quite sure how they'd perform in battle, even though we've seen them in Meereen. Even with one rider, the other two were fairly productive in support. But I think we'll find out here in the next couple episodes. We have to. We don't have that many left.
Victor, I do agree with you that, based on everything that we've seen, Jon's going to end up in a pretty hairy predicament. I think as soon as we saw that gate open up at Eastwatch and they go north, that we knew things would not end well for many of that party. I just don't know if a dragon's going to swoop into the rescue. But thanks for writing in. Next up, we have one from Ashley. And Ashley writes, Jon's story is the song of ice and fire. In truth, he is the ice dragon. He is of both Stark and Targaryen blood. He is born from the north and has the fire of the south. He is obviously the second rider alongside his aunt. And that little meeting with Drogon, I think, confirms that in this episode. That being said, everyone is pretty much leaning toward Tyrion as a third dragon rider. All three, Jon, Dany, and Tyrion, are outcast for various reasons. Their mothers all died in childbirth, Joanna Lannister, Lyanna Stark, and Rhaella Targaryen. All three have dead fathers, and all three are the third child of their families. Tyrion is the youngest out of Cersei, and Jaime. Daenerys is third after Rhaegar and Viserys. Jon is the third after his half-brothers, Rhaenys and Aegon. Also, Tyrion does not have to be Targaryen to be a dragon rider. There are many instances throughout Westerosi history where dragon taming has nothing to do with being unburnt like Dany. Instead, feeding, taking care of, taming the dragons can be done by those not just of Targaryen blood. Since Tyrion already showed us that he can be around the dragons without being eaten when freeing them in a previous season, it is possible for him to ride without his Lannister bloodline coming into question. So I think all that considered, there's a pretty decent set of facts for us to think that Tyrion could be number 3. Leaving that behind, we can't forget that Game of Thrones is always about balance. Thus, it can be assumed that if there's a 3-headed dragon on the fire side, there must be a set of 3 somethings on the ice side. The Night King is one, but who are the other 2? Could it be Bran? Will they have dragons? There already is a lot of basis to believe that there's an ice dragon in the wall that will be born when it comes down. Also, in other stories written by Martin, specifically the story The Ice Dragon, an ice dragon melts into water and makes a frozen pond. Winterfell hosts a pretty big frozen pond. Could there be a dragon there? Finally, I love the Harry Potter connection you guys have been making with Snape and Littlefinger, but I think you're forgetting another fun crossover perhaps. In the Harry Potter story, Neville Longbottom and Harry both could have been the chosen one. Voldemort chooses to go to Harry's house because he believes he's the chosen one, but it isn't until Voldemort himself makes that choice that it becomes so. What if the legend of Azor Ahai is the same? It's been made clear that the prince or princess promised thanks to Melisandre's translation assistance. Thus, what if it could be Dany or Jon? Maybe it'll come down to who is willing to make the sacrifice of their Nessa Nessa. After all, the support for both being the one that is promised is pretty strong, and that is the point. Maybe it'll all come down to who makes the decision to sacrifice the one they love. They both have the potential, but it will come down to choice. In essence, the real Azor Ahai will become the one that is promised due to their choice to do so. And that comes from Ashley, Houston, Texas, who writes, "Until then, we'll prep for the long night."
So I enjoy this. I remember telling friends who hadn't watched the show early on, who hate the genre of fantasy, of medieval and Dungeons and Dragons, and didn't like it. And I said, man, this show's not about that. This show is about intrigue. It's power play. I said, do you like House of Cards? Do you like that political drama of fighting for power? I said, that's what this show is. And then they slowly start dripping in the fantasy. Granted, we see a white and a White Walker in the first episode, but it's quick. How long did we go with very little magic and only hints of it to now we're at the point talking about frozen dragons, sets of dragons, who's going to ride the dragons, all mystical. It's become a completely different show, and I love it. But do you think the show would have been this popular if you started off with who's the dragon rider and people flying around burning troops? Would it have been as popular with the general TV public?
I mean, I think for a lot of people, when the show started out, that's actually what they expected, right? That's Game of Thrones is what they expected, and that's why it had to creep up in the ratings until finally it exploded. For a lot of people, though, who have stuck with the show, I think it's gratifying to see something to the effect of all these characters who have come so far, who have developed so much. And you think back to when the dragons were first born even, or when Daenerys, was first sold off. They came from something very small to be something very huge. And I think people appreciate that. That being said, with regards to the dragon riders, I do like this idea that people have been trying to figure out how Tyrion could be a Targaryen, right? That maybe his mother is really his mother, but his father is not Tywin. This is a great explanation for how it could be that Tyrion could be a dragon rider, but not be Targaryen. But again, the preoccupation with it, I think, is disturbing some people.
So book readers will know that there's been some rumors about liberties that were taken possibly on Joanna Lannister's their wedding night. So it's possible, but I'm not too concerned with who's going to be riding dragons. We got plenty more to worry about with the dead rising. And I like it.
I should point out that Ashley was not the only one with this viewpoint. We had several emails that came in regarding the dragon riders and really thinking along the storyline, the 3-headed dragon and that sort of thing. So other listeners, including Brittany, largely said the same thing. Sorry we couldn't include everyone's email on this one. And of course, to see all of them in their full form, this one was truncated as well. You can see them all at ShadowTV.com. If you go to the Game of Thrones and then select the small council, you can see all these in their entirety and respond to them. So thanks, Ashley, for writing in. Next up, we've got one about Maggie's baby prophecy, which was a really hot topic this week. And this one comes from a regular on the show. Nick B writes, "Gents, depending on how you feel about prophecy, I think Cersei's baby bump revelation has some huge implications. For starters, when Cersei asks if she will have kids with the king, Maggie replies, 'Oh, aye, 6 and 10 for him and 3 for you. Gold shall be their crowns and gold their shrouds. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you.' I'm going to say that this prophecy covers all of Cersei's children, regardless of the baby's daddy. This is because Jaime was the father of 3 children with hair of gold, despite Cersei asking about children she would have with the king. So the prophecy clearly covers children sired by Jaime. With that in mind, here are options I see panning out. 1. Cersei is not pregnant and is only telling this to Jaime to manipulate him to her desires. This would end poorly for Cersei when the truth comes out. However, she mentioned that if she's going to die, she would rather die fighting. So I don't think this is anything sacred or off the table when it comes to her doing what she must. Would this betrayal be enough to have Jaime choke the life from her? 2. Cersei is pregnant, but won't carry the child to term. The most interesting part of this theory would be that Cersei would essentially have a best if used by date. If she knows she won't have more children, she knows that if she tries to carry the child to term, she will die before the birth, 9 months max. So she knows that she will either lose the child or she will die before it is born. Would the death of Cersei and a child Jaime would call his own be too much? I don't think Jaime could take more loss. He would die with them. What do you guys think? I'm on the side that Cersei is evil and she is emotionally divested in Jaime and is using his love against him. That comes from Nick B.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion about the prophecy and about the 3 children that were foretold. And people call bullshit because in the show, in season 1, when Cersei's trying to console Catelyn, she talks about her young child with Robert that had black hair. And the question was brought up to the writer, Brian Cogman. And they said, how does this work within the world of the prophecy? Because you've shown the prophecy on screen now. How do you reconcile that? And they officially answer it, the writers, is saying that first child does not count against the prophecy because he died so young in the cradle. So the 3 here, I'm leaning towards Cersei does not make it to full term. And as horrific as it sounds, maybe dies with child.
It's strange to consider that, from a writer's standpoint, that they would say, oh, this baby died in the cradle and therefore is not legit, only because of the fact that anybody who's, experienced motherhood or has been around a mother would say that the child feels very real far before it's even born. And then, I have relatives and friends who have miscarried and they still refer to that as, that they lost a child essentially. So it is a weird thing, but that's their opinion. And so that's the way we should hold the count. We should honor that. With regards to Cersei's belief here, I think an avenue that people haven't explored is that Cersei might see this as overcoming the prophecy, rather, that she was told that she would only have 3 and that those 3 would die. And here she goes, well, if this part of the prophecy is false, then maybe all of it is false. Maybe the prophecy is bullshit.
Yeah, I like that take, that it could give her hope. For many years, you think back to the day when she heard the prophecy, and as it slowly became true, she seemed like her fate was set. The ink was dry, and she was doomed. This pregnancy, if it is real, could seem like that potential glimmer of hope. And if that hope somehow is snuffed out, I think there goes any hope of Cersei staying sane and not going off the deep end.
I do love the cynicism of the audience, though, in that it never even occurred to me when she made her pregnancy announcement to Jaime that she could be lying. I was like, oh, okay, let's try to figure this out. Is it Euron the dad? Is Jaime the dad? Or what's the story here? It never once entered my mind that she's actually just lying.
No, and the show has not shied away from killing unborn children at the Red Wedding or newborn children with Ramsay feeding them to the dogs. So with this show, you never know, but it could be any of the possibilities.
Thanks for writing in. The next one is a phenomenal email. This one comes in from Johnny D in London. And it's about, I'll let you figure out what it's about. It says, hi, guys. I love the pod, but I feel like you missed the most important aspect of the Game of Thrones. Which of the key characters would have the best stag do? The stag party for you predominantly American listeners. I've broken this down below, and I can only come to the conclusion that Tyrion must end Game of Thrones on the Iron Throne for having the best stag do. So we're going to do a rundown of bachelor parties for these guys. So the first one is Jaime. His is rated as really tragic and terrible stag do. Here's who would be invited. Qyburn is one creepy older guy who has a weird relationship with Jamie's fiance. Next up is Gregor Clegane, even creepier, massive bloke who doesn't speak ever and just gets in random fights. Then you'd invite Braun, the best man, who his fiance absolutely hates, but he has to be invited because he's saved his life a few times. His speech at the wedding will be hilarious but inappropriate. His brother and fiance don't get along, so his brother isn't invited because he doesn't want to upset the fiance. And the fiance, being Cersei, doesn't let him stay out late. The conclusion, shambles, no mates, should have gone bros before hoes a long time ago. Next up, we've got Jon's stag do. Mixed bag is the rating. So here are the invitees. Bran, the emo younger brother who has no interest in marriage because love and happiness are illusions, and anyway, we're not really brothers. Sir Davos, great man to have, a bit older, but he knows how to get you into, i.e. smuggle you into, all the clubs. Probably saves the day when the best man inevitably shits the bed. Good for anyone struggling to, quote, rise to the occasion with some fermented crab. Excellent wingman. Gendry, the younger guy who always goes way too hard, tries to impress everyone, and is super impressionable. Tormund, slightly weird friend of Jon's, quote, from work, who isn't mates with anyone else and obsessed with finding large women. Drinks weird stuff. Sam, he's the best man who doesn't really like going out, probably arranges a life drawing class of a man by accident, or Celine Dion for the activity part of the weekend. Tyrion, excellent man to have at any stag do, the god of tits and wine. Littlefinger, that one sly mate who's always trying to shag his sister or stepmom. Horrible bloke. A few new mates seemingly hastily acquired just to flesh out the numbers. Conclusion, too big a party, too many weak links, party has too diverse interests, and Jon is left trying to figure out his own stag do. And finally, Tyrion. Tyrion would have an absolute tear-up stag do. A 1 week bender in Ibiza. What happens on tour stays on tour. The invitees would be Jaime, loaded older brother, the downside of having to make him best man, offset by the fact that he's good looking and his hand is literally made out of gold. Desperately needs to let off steam, so he'll be super pumped for it. Grey Worm, who now loves telling jokes and also is very handy to have around if it kicks off with any other stag do's. Bronn, who probably knows all the best strip clubs. Mormont is a bit serious and a bit old, but can match everyone drink for drink. High pain threshold means he knows how to get through a hangover. Varys, the fixer, can get you anything you need, especially whores. Theon, used to be a philanderer, but now limited to wingman duties, a useful straight man. Jon, generally brooding, probably takes a while to get warmed up, but girls love him because he's so damned handsome. He only wants to talk about global warming, though, so best suited to loud nightclubs. And unnamed Dothraki. I think he's called Quogo. Got absolutely no filter, sure to do something outrageous very, very loudly. The conclusion, tight group, big boozers everywhere, no real weak link, stag do for the ages. Thank you, Johnny D, for that amazing overview.
He forgot that Jorah is just getting over a really bad infection. So, you might want to stay away from the ladies. And I can picture the Dothraki just pulling off all their clothes, going shirtless. But great work on this. A lot of thought was being put into it. And as you're reading through it, I'm picturing it. I just don't know why would Littlefinger be involved? You never want to take him on any party. He's just going to be trying to steal everybody's girl.
I think he's going to play that Knights of the Vale card forever, though. Like, oh, he didn't invite me. I brought you the Knights of the Vale.
He'd be the dick trying to steal like tip off the bar, and he'd get caught and then just like stick the tip into somebody else's pocket. Oh, that'd be a mess.
Yeah, so Johnny D, I can't improve upon this. Nope. I got nothing to say other than this is pure gold. Thank you so much. Next up, we got one about Sam leaving the Citadel. This comes from Luke from Spearfish, South Dakota. Says, you guys didn't talk about Sam. So you think it was a good move for Sam to leave the Citadel? I feel like he could have done Jon and the world of Westeros a better service by sneaking around, finding information, and sending it back to Jon by Raven. It showed once a few episodes back when he sent word of the secret dragonglass mine near Dragonstone. I mean, he basically grabbed all he could carry and left. I just feel he left a lot of useful knowledge behind, which might even include Jon's legitimacy. The way he was talking to Gilly about High Septon Maynard's memoirs made it seem like he wouldn't have brought that book along because he found it useless. I know us, the viewers, got some major insight that pretty much seals the deal on Jon's legitimacy, but unless you have documentation, I think it would be hard convincing people he's the rightful heir. As always, love your podcast. Keep it up. Regards, Luke from Spearfish, South Dakota.
Yeah, we know he's not much of a fighter. So the best way he could serve is by cultivating and searching for knowledge. He asked the maesters, why don't we all start looking through and maybe we can find an answer? Leaving the central repository for knowledge and all history doesn't seem like a bright move. He could get back up to Winterfell or wherever he's going and be like, man, I'm missing book 7 in this 10-part series that has the answer. Is he going to turn around and go back?
Yeah, I don't really know what his plan is. I know that he wants to, again, achieve great things. Right? He doesn't want to read about the greatness of other men. But the thing is that as a maester, he can fulfill some pretty huge duties. I mean, they're legendary. You've seen it in multiple places, including Winterfell and Castle Black, that the maester is revered, and also that they play huge roles in the day-to-day life and the overall, moral compass and history of each place.
I think it's silly that Sam left out of what seemed like spite because he was angry that the maesters didn't take Bran's warning seriously. If the maesters choose to send ravens to all of the houses in the north, Sam makes it clear they would immediately believe the threat is real and send all of their troops north. He would have been much better served as an asset to the fight by trying to slowly work on the leadership of the archmaesters as opposed to going north. What's he going to do there? His chances of helping are limited.
I unfortunately on the Instacast referred to the Tarly House sword as Bright Roar. In fact, it's Heartsbane, and we can assume that Sam is taking that blade, and that's going to play some role in the future. And that's fine. I'll withhold judgment on that. But I do think that the book that they did pack with them that proves Jon's legitimacy, I think that'll be a bigger role than the sword. I hope so.
Also, if you love little Sam, why are you leading him back to danger? When they were at the wall, he was trying to get them to Molestown and to get them to safety. Try to find a safe place. Let Gilly stay with little Sam. Go north, have your adventure. I wouldn't be taking my kid into known danger. It seems foolish.
I agree. All right, this next one comes up from Christina. Christina says, right now, and this could change, it seems to me that Littlefinger is still making a power grab. That his motivation is still to rise to power in whatever way he can. That may be getting Sansa to marry him. It may be to report back to Cersei to leverage information for elevated station. Or it could be some other thing we haven't yet seen. I know there is a theory that he will turn out to be a good guy in the end, but week to week so far, I've seen no evidence of that. I feel that Littlefinger still represents all that is wrong with monarchical rule, that the only person he really cares about is himself. Now, to Varys. Over the years, we've seen him act similar to Littlefinger for the most part, different means used to seemingly the same end. But getting to see his exchanges with major characters in Season 7, I think his endgame is completely different than that of Littlefinger. First, Varys' history being born a slave and sold off to a sorcerer for a large sum of money. Admittedly, he does not like anything to do with sorcery or witchcraft as a result of the ritual performed using his severed genitalia. He also spends his life rising to greater and greater station and prominence until he finds himself next to a king serving as his master of whispers. In the Season 7 dialogue with Daenerys, he says that it is not true that his allegiance has changed depending on who sat on the throne. He tells us for the first time what I think his true motivation to be. He says that he has always been in favor of what is best for the people of Westeros. He talks a bit about his past and how he sees the masses trampled by the gains of the rich and powerful. We're led to believe in this exchange that he is backing Daenerys because he thinks she is different than the others and will be the best option for the people. Daenerys believes this and retains his counsel. But here's the rub as I see it. There's clearly a mole in Daenerys' counsel. We have seen this several times in what appears to be leaked information to Cersei or Jaime. You guys have spoken about it at length on your podcast. I agree with you that the mole is likely Varys. This led me to question why that would be. Why not help Daenerys get rid of Cersei, knowing what a horrible queen Cersei is and will continue to be? Why not unseat her for a better queen? He knows that for the most part, Daenerys has a heart and will likely be just. I think it's because Varys wants no monarchy at all in Westeros. I think he wants a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people. If he is the mole in Daenerys' council, this explains why. Not only would his sale and castration have turned him against witchcraft, but also against subjugation of the poor by the rich, the powerless by the powerful. Wouldn't the greatest screw you to it all be that the boy whose genitals were severed and offered to the Lord of Light becomes the man who gives power to the people? George R.R. Martin has said that the end of this saga is bittersweet. Perhaps the bitter is that none of our beloved characters attains the Iron Throne, and the sweet is that the people of Westeros become a free and democratic people with the Night King defeated and all the would-be monarchy. Perhaps they are free to live and worship as they wish. So, as it stands right now, Littlefinger seems to embody all that is wrong with the power struggle of a monarchy. Despite his humble beginnings, he has decided to play the game to attain power for himself without care for the others who will still toil below. Varys seems to want the people to prevail, for them to have a better life and have greater control over their own destiny. And that comes from Christina.
So, Christina, I really like this email and I like this thought. Daenerys is focused on breaking the wheel, but as we've seen, everything in Game of Thrones is cyclical. There's always someone around. It's always in danger. The only way you want to have a prolonged period of peace and truly change the wheel for good is some form of democracy. I love the idea. I hope it comes true.
Thanks, Christina, for your email. Next up, we've got one from Brady. Brady writes, I can't have been the only person to notice that 7 men heading north of the wall echoed the roles of the 7 gods, some literal, some more symbolic. The father is Beric Dondarrion, who represents divine justice. Thoros is the mother, who represents divine mercy. Jon Snow is the maiden, pure and innocent. The crone is Jorah, wise and experienced. The warrior is the hound, which is obvious. The smith is Gendry, which is also obvious. The stranger is Tormund, a stranger to Westeros, given he comes from a far north of the wall. What do you guys think of this idea, Brady?
I think this is interesting. I mean, to me, it looks like you could have mixed up some of these and made them slightly different. So in that, I don't know that's a perfect match, but it's an interesting observation. Gendry is just too easy to make him the smith. Couldn't he be the mother? Or couldn't he be maybe the maiden?
No, he's clearly the smith. I mean, look, when I saw the 7 of them go north of the wall, I tweeted, I said, the first person to write us about noticing that it was 7 people going north of the wall with regards to the 7 gods, I said, you're going to win a swift kick at the dick. So, Brady, congratulations. But I see where you're going here. A lot of people also were putting out memes this week, referring to them as basically like a Dungeons and Dragons party.
No, see, I'm rearranging them right now. I think that Beric is the mother. For divine mercy, he's come back 6 times. So I think he represents that. The warrior, yeah, we'll go with the hound. Yeah, I still like that. The smith, we'll go with Gendry. The stranger, yeah, Tormund, he fits him. But I think for the father, since Beric is now the mother, the father has to be Jorah. Wise, experienced, I think it fits. But we could do this in God, how many different ways?
You also could say that the crone is the warrior because he has the vision. You could flip it around and say that the stranger is the hound. It could go,
Well, the stranger could be Gendry because nobody knows him.
Or how to pronounce his name.
Gendry.
All right, thanks for writing in, Brady. Next up, we have some A-Team action here, right on the tail end of the 7 gods and 7 characters idea. This is the White Walker capture plan coming from Doug. He says, hi, fellas. I picked up on the podcast this season. Really great stuff. Keep up the good work. I'd love it if on Thursday you could do a deeper dive into this plan to capture a White Walker and I guess present it to Cersei or some shit. I was astounded at how quickly everyone agreed to what seems like a ridiculous plan. It was actually distracting for me the rest of the episode. If you could just touch on what exactly the plan is and how it's supposed to help everyone's cause, that'd be super. Other than just getting the badass crew of 7 together, I wasn't sure what the fuck was going on. Thanks, Doug.
So I started thinking about how would I capture a white? And problem is they don't generally seem to travel alone. The only solo white I believe we've seen, other than the opening sequence with the girl, they generally seem to travel in packs. So that means you're going to have to try to separate a pack. This presents a lot of danger. You could lay some kind of trap, maybe try to get their leg, but if they yank pretty hard, you might take the leg off. I don't see of any easy way to get this done. Is it worth trading potentially 7 of your best warriors on a plan that the likelihood of succeeding is maybe, 15%, 10%? How would you try to capture a white?
I mean, for me, I think it really comes down to maybe allowing one in. That's the part that worries me. Like, I know it's not The Walking Dead or whatever, but if I were a superstitious person living in Westeros, without the benefit or aid of of advanced science or anything like that, I would be like, do not bring that into this city. You know, you don't know how it spreads. You don't know. I would be like, absolutely not. This is a terrible idea. And so I don't understand, you know, the idea that I was surprised that nobody raised a hand and just said, hey, this sounds like a really bad idea. Like everybody just seemed to kind of nod and go, yeah, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, I think they needed to. If you wanted me to catch one and you gave me 6 months, I could do it. I would set up maybe some pits. I would set up some snare traps. But to catch one really quick, you're going to force them to be reckless and actually have to proactively go search for a herd, which inherently is dangerous. And then you have to somehow get it back. Because once you catch one, you know they're all going to come after you because they're not alone. So I don't know any way this is going to work. It's a disaster. But I'll tell you one thing, it's going to be fun to watch.
I have no doubt about that. I'm definitely looking forward to episode 6 and seeing how they figure this out or don't. Next up, we have one coming from, well, there's no name here.
You know what else you could do? You could get a large crate. And if you prop the crate up with a stick and you run a rope around the boulder, and then you put some kind of meat or you put maybe Gendry under the box, the white goes under, you pull the string, boom, you got him.
I mean, that is the finest kind of meat you can find in Westeros. It's just a fresh young Gendry.
Ladies love him. Whites love him.
A few people have tried to figure out how we're going to get looks at his body while he's, you know, all bundled up in furs going north. And I think the best solution that I've heard is just a fur vest. I think it's going to be the way to go.
A fur vest is always the answer.
All right. Thanks for writing in. The next one is titled Question on Little Sam. It says, Sam told the Maesters he let Bran Stark through the wall, quote, years ago. You'll remember Gilly and Little Sam were both there when this happened. So, why does Little Sam look so young, maybe 2 years old, in a scene after Sam just said that? I see 3 reasons this might be. Reason 1, oversight of the show, but is that likely in a scene right after Sam relates an event to the timeline? Reason 2, something weird about the calendar in this universe and their definition of year. And 3, it was deliberately done as a hint that Little Sam is a special baby somehow. Thoughts?
Well, this made me think back to a topic you had covered, I believe it was maybe last Small Council, wondering why Sam, when he encountered the Whites at the end of season, was it 2 or 3? And they just walked past him. And we wondered, was it he's not a threat, he's just pathetic, and they choose to walk right past him? Remember, Sam saved Little Sam from Craster's Keep. And Craster's Keep, all the young babies they were providing to the White Walkers as a sacrifice or whatever, to where they would convert them into the White Walkers. So the writer asks, is Little Sam special? Well, we know he is special because technically his brothers are White Walkers. I hope they don't go there, but it could explain some of the special treatment that Sam got. Maybe they let him go because they knew that he had, somehow intervened and saved one of their brothers. I think it's unlikely, but it's plausible.
I liked it with Ripley and Aliens. I think I can continue to like it to here. So I'm sorry, Alien 3. So I think I continue to like it here. It's an interesting idea, though. We've talked about in Westeros and in this universe, in this world, time seasons are not identical each year. So you can have long winters, long summers, and we know that we're going into a long winter here. So if anything, it would seem that after a couple of years would be a longer time, especially this last couple of years. But I think it was probably just an oversight. They're like, baby, toddler, whatever.
No, I think Sam's special. Little baby Sam.
All right. Thanks a lot. Next one comes up from the Whiteboardist. Says, good evening, hosts. I've been following your podcast since Westworld, and as soon as I finished watching this week's episode, I thought to myself, Big D is going to have a fit over this one. C:/analysismode.exe. Bottom line, is the show becoming predictable due to poor writing, or because it's hard to keep obvious story points mysterious this late in the game? Also, is the show doing an adequate job portraying the passage of time? As this season has gone on more and more often, the tinfoil theories have turned out to be correct. Be careful what you wish for, because it seems like your traveling roadshow of freaks is coming true this season. On top of that, as I predicted to my friends, Gendry was magically found smithing along the way, and Jaime floated down the river to safety without removing his armor, and Samwell finds proof of Jon's parentage, though he annoyingly ignores it. Additionally, people travel from near King's Landing to Dragonstone to King's Landing, back to Dragonstone, and then all the way to the Wall in one episode. Just how much time passed? the show seems to have lost any sense of pacing. From what I recall, the reason we were getting less episode this season was because they didn't have enough material for the full 10 episodes. But it feels like they've already cut out plenty of relevant material. Here's hoping they still manage to give a satisfying ending. Looking at you, Sopranos. C:\\asuwere.exe, signed The Whiteboardist. And C:\\tinfoiltheory.txt, the white they bring back as proof will be Hodor.
So I think I've come up with the answer to this, or at least what's caused the complaints and the rushed plot and some of the disjointed components. George has been feeding them, we assume, an outline of kind of end points for the show, forcing the Double D and the writing staff to work backwards from that point. And with so few shows left, they have to take shortcuts to make it get there. So it's more the plot is being driven by an end goal instead of organically following an arc.
I think one of the dangerous things about this precedent, too, is that we talk about the balance between exposition and action, how some shows move too slowly. I think Westworld struck a pretty good balance there. But what happens in seasons like this is that we're not getting enough time with these characters doing normal things. You know, someone wrote in about in season 4, I believe it is, when Tyrion has the discussion of his cousin, and the story is not directly overtly related to any of the action. It's a slower paced scene, but it's incredible acting. It's great storytelling. And there are lessons in there about Tyrion, about the world that they live in, about the viewpoints on idiots and the outcast. And you care more about him as a result. We don't care so much about these characters necessarily for the heroic actions they took or the special effects that were involved, but rather the dialogue, the relationships. And I think those are suffering this season, but there's plenty of time to turn that around. And sometimes you might need to hit a reset, or you might just need to put the pieces in place. And this beats either jumping into something that doesn't make sense or just having it written out for us. Somebody telling the story. Okay, and then John went here and did this, blah, blah. At least we get to see it, so we can't complain too much.
No, and there's also the chance that this kind of rushing and forcing the pieces together will only be this 7-episode piece. And hopefully then when we come back for the final season, the final 6 episodes, it's okay. I'd be willing to take those shortcuts now to get to a coherent finish. I don't think it's as big a problem as we're making it out to be. And it's still great TV. There's nothing else better on TV to watch.
All right. Thanks for writing in. And our last email to the Small Council comes from Max. Max writes, "Hey guys, while thinking about how John is going to capture a White Walker, I caught myself trying to remember how someone turns into a Walker. Do they have to be killed by a Walker or actually resurrected? If you turn by just being killed by a Walker, I could see a situation where someone puts himself in a cage as a sacrifice. As soon as the sacrifice is killed, they could drag the cage back to the wall. The question is, who would sacrifice themselves?" And that's from Max.
Man, I like this idea. You know who would make a great sacrifice? Either one of the red shirts or a blacksmith from King's Landing.
It's terrible. So here's the thing: is no, you don't have to be killed by a white, because you see the dead can die from various ways. I saw at Hardhome, and they can still be brought back. It's an active movement by the Night King, and I believe that also by the White Walkers. But the whites themselves, I feel more that they're, it's not a disease. It's not like The Walking Dead. This is magic.
It used to be in the past that they would only reanimate if they died north of the wall. But as the series went on, I think there was a couple cases, even when we had the wildlings attack Castle Black and there was a lot of dead, they piled them up and burned them out of fear that even though they were on the southern side of the wall, that they could reanimate, especially after the Lord Commander was attacked by a reanimating white within Castle Black. This idea, as terrible as it sounds, right? It's horrible. The idea that you would take a red shirt, no one's going to volunteer for it. But in the end, sacrificing one person, you take the cage north of the wall, you put him in it, you kill him, you've trapped your white, you go south, you're not risking 7 of our most beloved characters. It's horrible to say, but doesn't the sacrifice make sense?
I don't think it makes sense at all in the sense that just because somebody dies doesn't mean that they're reanimated. We see at Hardhome that it's a conscious decision by the Night King to reanimate them. So it's not like just by virtue of death you're going to be reanimated.
I still would take the chance. I would
Jesus Christ.
Hold on. I would take the box on the other side. You have to try it. You kill them, maybe gave it 2 or 3 hours. If it doesn't work, you go north. Either way, you're going to lose a lot of your men. I would at least try to sacrifice just one.
To all the men who served with Big D in the air assault, you are braver men than I, and let's just be glad that he wasn't an officer.
Well, we didn't have to deal with zombies or the dead coming back.
All right. Thanks, Max, for writing in, and thanks, everyone, for your incredible emails. Again, we are just swimming in email. They're coming in Sunday as soon as the episode ends, before the Instacast even gets out. They continue through Monday. They just pile on lots of powerful stuff, deep looks into the books. I encourage everybody to go look at them at shadowntv.com. Contribute your own voice to it. Let us know what you think. There's a lot of just a wealth of research being done, and we will make it a point to respond to everyone and get your letters and emails up on the website as soon as possible.
Yeah, I feel guilty as we're sitting here reading these because there's so many that we don't read that I want to respond. People put a lot of effort into it. And I'm going to try to go back through. It's just tough with the frantic schedule of recording, editing, putting out, watching, rewatching. But a lot of these emails, it means a lot to us that people put in the time. So even if you don't get read on the air, please don't think we're not even reading them or they just don't mean anything to us. We discussed about 15 emails trying to fight to get them on right in this podcast. Great stuff. We appreciate them. Keep them coming. And we really appreciate you making the effort.
All right, and now it's the time of the show where you take pot shots at us. This is the Actually segment. So we'll start off with one from Christina. This is a YouTube comment. So again, if you have a correction for us, you can write in on YouTube. You can write in via Twitter using the hashtag Actually, or you can write straight to us in an email at host@shadowontv.com and include in the subject line Actually. That'll help us spot them quickly and get them all curated. So the first one says, actually, Sam cannot be the head of House Tarly. He is sworn to the Night's Watch. Jon had to die for his watch to end.
Yep, that is a good one, Christina. You're correct. So the next one comes from YouTube again, from Sunkyo Ship. Actually, Sam has Heartbane, not Bright Roar. Bright Roar was the family sword of House Lannister. Pretty sure it was lost, and that was Sunkyo Ship.
So that's Heartsbane, not Bright Roar. My bad. That was my bad. I take full responsibility for that. Next one comes up from Chris Cross. Actually, a scorpion is not a clever name thought up by Game of Thrones for a fantasy weapon they made up in their heads. It has a real origin made by Romans who could be considered of a similar tech level to Westeros. The name has nothing to do with a multi-legged giant tail stinger scorpion. There's nothing unrealistic or ridiculous about its concept. It's perfectly feasible for one man to use it, albeit at a slower pace, which seemed pretty similar to what Bronn was shooting at. That comes from Chris Cross. Chris, you're absolutely correct. I look up the history of it, and it's actually different from a ballista. It was typically a two-person weapon, but it could be operated by one, just at a slower pace.
Oh, this next one's one of my favorites. It's from Gary. It was an email. And I got to tell you, Gary made my day. Because there's two different types of actuallys. There's like the, hey, actually, you guys screwed up here. And then there's the, actually, you guys suck. So Gary gave me one of those. Gary's email was titled, "You're wrong." Actually, Jaime never saw someone burn. He killed the Mad King before he burned anyone. Please, before you tell your knowledge of Game of Thrones, try to actually have knowledge. And that's from Gary. So I was so happy to respond to Gary right away, because obviously Gary hasn't been paying attention to the show. And I said, "Dear Gary, here's some dry pie for you. And thanks for listening." And gave him the dialogue between Jaime and Ned Stark when Ned was held prisoner before he was executed. 500 men just stood by and watched. All the great knights of the Seven Kingdoms. You think anyone said a word? Lifted a finger? No, Lord Stark. 500 men. And the room was silent as a crypt. Except for the screams, of course. And later, when I watched the Mad King die, I remember him laughing as your father burned. It felt like justice. So it sounds to me like Jaime did watch somebody burn.
Yeah, I mean, they make several references in the show to this scene and to multiple scenes where people were burned alive. Jaime being part of the Kingsguard, it seems pretty obvious that he might have been around for a few of those. So, sorry, Gary. Next one comes from Ryuna Ostuna, and it says, actually, Ned was alive when Sansa wrote that letter. You are absolutely correct. in Sansa's letter, she says, basically she's appealing to Robb, and she says, to say father, essentially, or for the love of your father. And so, yeah, she would have no reason to mention that if Ned were already dead. You're absolutely right. My apologies. Mea culpa.
Yeah, and remember, she wrote the letter as an attempt to have Joffrey give him the option of taking the black. So good catch on that. And that's the way you do an actually. Next one comes from Kyle S. Actually, so you mentioned Cersei's prophecy. In the show, Cersei had a baby with Robert that died of fever. So prophecy wrong. We discussed that earlier on. The show runners and the writers have this essentially written it off, saying the baby, if it dies in the cradle, it doesn't count. So prophecy is on.
The next one is the sweetest actually I think we've ever gotten. Turner, you're an absolute sweetheart. It says, actually... And I know it was a minor oversight since there was so much to discuss on Tuesday night. Thank you so much. Robert killed Prince Rhaegar and not the king with a warhammer to the chest. You're absolutely right. We just discussed it. The king was killed by Jaime Lannister, so it was not Robert who killed him. Robert killed Prince Rhaegar, and actually replied to Turner with a beautiful artistic rendition of what that looked like. But you're absolutely correct, Turner, and thank you for being so gentle. It's been a long week.
Here's another one. Unfortunately, I don't know who it's from. And it wasn't so much as an actually as to giving us a possible answer for a question we're always asking. But actually, regarding Euron ships, we as the audience don't need to take Euron at his face value. He said 1,000 ships, but you yourself said we haven't seen 1,000. Perhaps, to him, 1,000 means just a bunch. Maybe he's just exaggerating to his men and to Cersei.
Yeah, I think that's pretty valid. I mean, there's hyperbole. There's room for that. I did have a discussion with a couple people on Twitter, though, I think including Tiago and some other listeners, though, about, just how many he's talking about. Because honestly, if you had only the men that we saw at Pike, it would take a year to even build 30 ships. So even if you have 100, that's no small feat, considering that he seems hot on the tail of the Iron Fleet. It wasn't like he took a year to regroup.
No, I think also maybe 1,000 is a magic number. When Jaime's reporting to Cersei all the damage they've taken, they lost 1,000 wagons. We didn't see Daenerys burn maybe 50. So maybe 1,000 in Westeros is a figure of speech.
I feel like someone's going to make a supercut now of all 7 seasons, all the time somebody said 1,000. They're going to slap it all together. There's someone out there right now working on it, so thanks for that. And finally, we have one from Greg. And Greg, again, opens up very kindly. He says, thanks for reading my email on air. I rewatched the Battle of the Bastards and actually did not see an arrow in Jon's thigh. Check out the pic attached, though. That's some magic force field action right there. So I had spoken about how in previous seasons, our big players, our favorite characters could get hurt, could get injured, could have their lives threatened, and now they seem to just be skating by with some magic force field. And he pointed out that in the Battle of the Bastards, Jon had that going on too. I watched the Battle of the Bastards, and I've watched it several times. I thought when Jon goes to ground, he takes an arrow in the leg. And in the picture, you can see actually the arrow is kind of in the foreground, and it's soft focus. So I guess I need to get my eyes checked or something like that. It's not through his leg, it's near his leg. So you're absolutely right, Greg. I apologize. Jon had a magic force field, and maybe the Battle of the Bastards wasn't all I thought it was. It's still pretty damn great, though.
It's a good one.
All right. And with that concludes this week's episode of On the Throne, Small Council. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend, or on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at ShatOnTV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com, where you can find all of these and more. And email us at hosts@shatontv.com. Again, with any thoughts, any further corrections, your actuallys, anything else you want to talk about, and we'll be glad to respond. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please do leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Finally, if you like Shat on TV, check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review the best 80s and 90s movie from our childhood that you, the audience, vote for. Check out all that information at shatthemovies.com. And that one's been on repeats for a while, but we are coming up with Top Gun in the very near future. How's that coming along, Big D?
It's a good one. We recorded it last weekend. And Top Gun was not the movie I remembered, so I think it'll be a good cast. But the goal is to have it out at the beginning of next week.
All right, so on behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, be sure to join us on Sunday for our Instacast after episode 6, the penultimate episode of season 7 of Game of Thrones. Thanks for listening, and as always, be sure to knock twice before joining us on the throne.